Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our second video. Today we are dealing with the question of moderation. As we told in the last video, we have two very important tools in wildlife management, and these are participation and moderation. And participation needs necessarily moderation. So now we have a very short, very quick overview what means moderation. So it's a kind of crash course in moderation. Normally we need much more time. Normally we need also lecture with presence due to some exercises. We have a lot of possible exercises for moderation. This is not possible by this medium, by this video, but maybe you will get a short insight in this topic and learn some basics on moderation. So the first very important question is, what means moderation? Maybe we have a look what moderation does not mean. Moderation does not mean that what we can see every evening in a TV show, in a talk show, there is a so-called moderator, and this moderator is trying to give some more or less stupid comments on that what other people are saying. This is not moderation. Moderation in our field of work in wildlife management, also in a lot of other fields, moderation is a tool to support a group of people to solve a problem. So a moderator helps people to solve their problem. And moderation is done by means of a workshop or a discussion, and it is normally done with participants of different concerns. So if all participants have the same opinion and have the same idea how to reach a goal, you don't need necessarily a moderator, but you need a moderator if participants have different opinions, have different backgrounds, have different ideologies, and so on. And we have heard in the human dimensions of wildlife video that a lot of problems, a lot of conflicts between humans and wildlife is not conflict between humans and wildlife, but is a conflict between humans and other humans, between different groups, different opinions, different goals, different ideas, and so on. And so this wildlife management necessarily needs moderation and needs a moderator. And if we have to solve a certain problem, we have to think who will be the moderator, who will be a person who is able to moderate our discussions or our workshops. So what should a moderator be? A moderator should be independent. What does that mean? A moderator should not be involved in one or the other idea or goal or company or NGO that is involved in a discussion, in a conflict, or something like that. Maybe at that time we should shortly talk about conflicts. Moderating is a tool to solve a problem. Moderating is not primarily a tool to solve a conflict, but a lot of conflicts in an early stage can be solved also by a moderated process. So if the conflict is older, the conflict is more established, then you need a mediation. It's also kind of moderation, but it's an other approach. But the early stages of conflicts and certain problems that can find a common solution should be solved in a moderated process. So the moderator should be independent from all the groups involved in the process, involved in the group of people. The moderator should be experienced concerning moderation. So moderation is something you have to learn over a long time, and you become more and more trained by doing moderations. So dependent on how severe is the problem or how severe is the beginning conflict, you need a more or less experienced moderator, better, more experienced. A moderator should be a person showing a special kind of personality, a kind of selfhood to help to solve the problem, to be accepted as a kind of coach to solve the problem. And it's a very interesting question is, should a moderator be an expert in the field she or he is moderating? Some people say no, a moderator should not be an expert. Maybe sometimes it's better to be not an expert because there are no pre-formation in mind to the problem and about the problem. In my opinion, a moderator should be an expert in the field that is discussed. Why that? If you're not very familiar with this field of work, this field of discussion, you are not able to recognize who is doing alliances, what arguments are honest arguments, what arguments are not real arguments, and so on. We will see it in some examples later on. So yes, in my opinion, the moderator should have expertise in the field of work and the field of discussion. What is the job of a moderator? So a moderator sometimes is hired to do this workshop to solve a problem using one or normally more workshops or discussions. And the moderator should prepare the workshop. So preparation means to invite, to organize a room, for example, to organize technique, to counsel people having the problem, whom should we invite for the workshop. So it's a selection of people who has to be invited for a workshop is also normally part of the moderator or part of a cooperation between moderator and the organization that is organizing the workshop. When people are sitting together in a room, the moderator has to introduce the problem. The moderator has to tell the people what is their job for the day and for the following discussion. The moderator has to navigate the discussion, especially by overcoming critical parts of discussion. And the moderator should conclude the discussion in the workshop with a result, ideally with a result. Or if we don't have a result, then the moderator gives recommendations what to do for the future. Normally, the job of the moderator is to have a result, but it's in most cases we are finding part of a result, and we should have more discussions and more workshops for solving special and maybe also problems arising during the workshop. And it's very important, the moderator is not responsible for the result itself. The group is responsible for the result. The moderator is responsible for helping the group, for navigating the group to find the result. So the result is not the opinion or the result of a moderator, it's a result of the group. And you should keep that in mind. And this leads to the previous transparency, the question of independence. The moderator has to be independent. So he is not in odore to bring his own or her own ideas into the result. So what doesn't mean the preparation of a workshop? The moderator should think about the goals of the workshop. So what goals will we reach in this session? So how many time do we have? How many time do we like to have? Maybe a workshop lasts 2 hours, 3 hours, sometimes 4 hours. If it lasts longer, it's much more difficult to find clear and good results. So it should be recommended to have a discussion or a workshop between, say, 1 hour and maybe 4 hours. The next question is, which participants? Who is participant? This is sometimes it's due to the moderator to invite them and to select them who is invited. Sometimes is the job of the organization that is organizing the discussion. Who means, for example, what we discussed also in the Human Dimensions video. Should we invite representatives from NGOs? Or should we invite people from the basis directly involved in the problem? So for example, if you have a classical problem situation, you have a national park and you have villages around the national park and you have farmers or herdsmen in the surrounding area. So will you invite these people directly from the villages? Will you invite the people directly from the national park? Or will you invite representatives from NGOs, from this big nature conservation NGO and so on? So in my opinion, it is better to get the people directly involved in the problem and not the representatives, the NGOs. Because, we have mentioned that already, because often, not every time, but often, NGOs are not so much interested in solution of a problem, because they are, not every time, but often, live from the persistence of the problem, not from its solution. So if you can do it, try to do it really bottom up. And if you're in the situation to invite the people. Often you are not in the situation, often the people are invited by others and you have to moderate them. The next question is, and in this question you should be involved as a moderator, is the question, how many people do we need? So a discussion of 2 people normally should not be moderated. Sometimes yes, but normally they should be able to solve a problem in a bilateral way. A group to be moderated is ideally from at least, say, 3 or 4 people up to 7. So 7 is a very good group size for moderation. And a maximum, some people say should be 12. Some say also 15, but 15 is a very big group and it's very hard to moderate a group of 15 people. More is even worse. So the maximum I have moderated was a group of around 45 or 50 people. It was very terrible. It was very hard job to do that, and the outcome was very few. And this is the normal situation. So try to have a group about 7 people, maximum maybe 12. So these two numbers, 7 and 12, are kind of magic numbers having to do a lot with human evolution, with human history and so on. So because 7 is a normal size of a family of 2 parents and say 5 children, and 12 is the size of an enlarged family, maybe with his grandfather and grandmother, and from both parents. So this means 12. You should know about the relationships between the participants. So if you don't know it before, you should try to find out how are the participants related in any way. It doesn't mean only from different organizations, but also the question, how are the arguments of a person, of an organization, with respect to the arguments of other persons or organizations in former times. So you can look at previous statements of these organizations or persons. And so you will see how they will interact. What is the state of knowledge of the person? So it's different if you are moderating a session of people with an academic education, or of farmers, of village people, of semi-professionals or professionals, and so on. You should be familiar with these facts. And you should know the domains of interests. This is very important to analyze these questions before you're starting your discussion. The next question is, do we need an agenda to be fixed? Sometimes it's making sense to have an agenda, maybe agenda as a handout, maybe you note it down on a flip chart. Sometimes it's helpful to have this agenda. In other cases, maybe it's better to have no agenda. It depends on the problem you have to solve. Next question is handout material necessary? No, normally handouts are not necessary for a moderation. People should not be clobbered over the head with handouts. This is true for most presentations, but it's especially true for moderations. So better no handouts, but maybe a fixed agenda in a handout or on that flip chart. Sometimes better a flip chart, because if you involve the participants to discuss a little bit the agenda, then you have a flip chart or a blackboard you can modify this. So when you're starting the moderation, the day 0, so all the people are sitting in the room, have taken their places, and you are standing in front of them and you have to moderate it. And I say you're standing in front of them, not you're sitting in front of them. It's very important. A moderator normally should stay. She or he should not sit. There are some exceptions to be discussed, but normally the moderator should stay. This is due to the acoustic reasons, but also due to the better possibility to navigate a discussion. And if you start first, you have the goals. What is the goal of the start of a moderation? The first goal is to attract attention. So people should listen to the moderator. Then you have to arouse interest. You have bring the group in a good mood. You have a guarantee a positive atmosphere, and you have to inform them about the topic. So what do we have to do today? And this is also the same in presentations. As you know, the methods in the starting part of a moderation are, for example, silence. So if they are talking to each other, stay and wait for a moment until the room is silent. Have eye contacts. Then you give a short address of welcome, and then you describe the topics. Maybe you can discuss the topics in the group, but normally it's better to have an agenda and to describe the topics. And do not forget to describe also the benefits of this discussion, of this workshop for the participants. So maybe some of them do not really know why they are sitting there or what is the benefit for them. And try to give all participants the feeling that they will benefit from the discussion. The next is to give an organization. That means an agenda, as we just mentioned. Find out a person writing a journal. Maybe you are in a situation to have a co-moderator. Sometimes 2 people are engaged for a moderation, and then you have maybe 1 moderator and 1 co-moderator, and the co-moderator is responsible for the journal writing and also for the speakers list and so on. You have to give a fixed time allotted for speaking. So this is a very important, a very critical point in moderations. So you should allow people and you should motivate people to tell their arguments, but you should not motivate and allow them to give long, boring statements. And we all know the situation that people from the auditory or from the discussion group is standing up, looking for a lot of sheets of papers and beginning to read. And this should not happen. So you should, before we start, you should say, okay, every statement is restricted. For example, what I'm normally doing, it's restricted to 3 main clauses per statement. That's very important. So every important thing could be said in 3 main clauses. And then ask for accordance in the auditory in the group up to this point. So to ask in the auditory, does anyone agree? And if someone is not agreeing, you should give it in the group, discuss it again. Should we do it this or that way? Then the central point of your moderation, the discussion is starting. And the moderator has to call the agenda items one after another. A moderator has to have a list of speakers, or in the best case, a co-moderator has this list of speakers because it's hard to do it everything simultaneously. List of speakers, having a look who is wanting to make a contribution, following mentally the discussion and so on. So better you have another person having the list of speakers. You have to control the time of discussion, and in the beginning you have also to give a statement how long the discussion will last. So say, okay, now we have 12:30, and we have today 2 hours to discuss and to solve the problem, and at 2:30 we will finish with a result. During discussions, you have to summarize intermediate results. And also, if a participant is giving or trying to give a long statement, you can stop this person easily with a short summarizing and say, okay, as far as I understood your comment, you say this and that, 3 main clauses. And you can use a lot of helpful items, cards, write them statements down on the cards, write statements on the blackboard, write a statement on a flip chart. So we should not discuss, we have not the time to discuss it in detail. You have a lot of helpful things. You can use them, you must not use them, but normally we should note down the statements somehow. So in my opinion, it's very easy to write it on cards and pin the cards at a pin board, for example. And the co-moderator maybe can organize these statements. Then the moderator has to stimulate discussion. What means if nobody says anything, the moderator should stimulate, ask a question, or give by yourself a comment to provoke. You have to look that contributions are stringent, as I told. You have to stop marathon speakers, as I told you. 3 main clauses to be written maybe on a card, and there's no more space than 3 main clauses. Keep the discussion neutral, so stop people with kind of hate speech and something like that. Stimulate persons being not so communicative. So you know it from a discussion group maybe. There are somehow sitting there all the time, looking around, and she or he doesn't say a word. And you can observe that for a time, but sometimes you have to integrate this person also into the group. And maybe if the discussion has run down, nobody says anything, then you have the opportunity to ask this person, maybe person X or Y has also a comment on it. Do you? And then maybe you'll get very interesting commands, but you have to ask them. And very important, one of the major functions of moderator is to keep the emotions out of the discussion. And you keep the emotion out also by summarizing by yourself. So if you have an emotional comment, bring it in your own neutral words and note it down and get the feedback. So a person gives an emotional comment and you say, okay, as far as I understood, the core of your comment is this and that, very neutral. May I write down it on the card or may I write down it on the blackboard? And the person normally says yes. If not, would be interesting. And now we are at the critical part of the discussion. And this is also one important reason why you should have a moderator. Every discussion comes sometimes to critical parts. And these critical parts could be, for example, silence, no discussion. And as I told you, this silent situation you can overcome by giving a question or giving a provocative comment. The other problem are monologues, or if people read statements. So you have to stop these monologues, you have to stop these read statements, and also what I can bullshit statements. So if, for example, a representative of an NGO is reading the manifest of the NGO or something like that, completely bullshit, and no helpful comment to the discussion. And then, okay, you listen maybe 2, 3, 4 sentences, and then you stop and say, okay, as far as I understood, or did I understand you righteously, you would say this or that, and you give this very short statement, and you ask, is that correct? Yes, thank you. And you pin it at the pinboard. Emotions. Emotional releases, for example, it's an extreme form of statement, but sometimes you find this situation that the person is beginning to cry or to shout or something like that. And it's also your job to calm the situation. Wait a moment, stop it, react in an adequate way. So if you could have exercises, we could train that, but actually we cannot do that. Another problem of emotions are, say, subtle denunciations. So it's the same with as the other things. You have to bring out these subtle denunciations and try to find out what the person is trying to say or what the person is planning in the discussion with these subtle denunciations. And then you have also to react in this or in that way as you recognize what is the real reason to say that or that. And in this situation, it is very helpful if you're an expert situation. Sometimes if you do not have expertise, you will not find out these subtle things. Another thing easily to recognize is open aggression, and here we do the same as when we have emotional releases, we have to try to get the emotions out of the discussion. And these emotions, they normally are against other group members. And this is easy for a moderator to clear this problem. Sometimes you have this aggression against the moderator. So someone is standing up and says, okay, you are the wrong person as a moderator, you're too much involved, you're telling us bullshit, and why should we sit here and waste our time, and so on and so on. What to do then? Remember, moderation is to support people solving their own problems. So if aggression or emotion is against the moderator, you have only one chance to give the things back into the group. So if one says, okay, you are the wrong person, then you say, okay, thank you for your statement, asking the group, are the other members of the group also of the opinion that I'm the wrong person? If the majority says yes, I never faced that situation, that the majority says yes. Normally the majority says no, we should proceed in our discussion. So you get the support from the group. What to do with, say, fanciful recommendations, or maybe putative fanciful recommendations, not serious recommendations. What can we do? Moderating means helping the group. And if some people or if some person says, okay, why discussing here so long in the room? Let's go out, have a barbecue, go fishing or something like that, go drinking. What can you do? Yes, you can ask the group, are the others also of the opinion? It's better to go fishing than to discuss here. The same way, the same mechanism. As a moderator, it's good if you find out syndicates, if you feel if people maybe from different organizations with different opinions are closing together against others. So you have to recognize this and you have to stop this phenomenon. Yes, and the same also with redundant contributions. Redundant contributions is very easy. So if you have a pinboard or a blackboard written the commands, and the command is given a third or fourth or fifth time, you ask the person, thank you for your command. Maybe it is subsumized in this or that command we have already here at the pinboard. Do you agree? And normally people agree or say, okay, we need a slight modification or something like that. Yes, these are the most, not all, but the most critical parts of the discussion. This is why we should have exercises normally, because in exercises we can have a role play and to try out what can happen in a moderation. Yes, the conclusion. You have, as a moderator, to summarize the important results. You should ask yourself and you should ask the group, did we meet our target? Have we solved our problem? It's not a problem if we didn't have solved it. But if we didn't have solved it, we asked, have we done a significant step towards the solution of the problem? And if yes, then we have to ask, what are, for example, the duties of certain participant, and until When? Be careful in building subgroups for the future. So it is very easy, but it's not very professional for a moderator to say, okay, we have now discussed and maybe we are a little bit more towards the solution of the problem, but there's a lot of way in front of us, and now we have 2 subgroups or 3 subgroups solving the problems. No, normally it's not a good way. You have to make a concluding journal at least, so give very important specific results. Or sometimes you have also to prepare a full journal of the complete discussion. So it depends on the situation, on the question to be solved, on the involved organizations and so on, and the traditions in these organizations. Eventually, if you did not have a complete or nearly complete solution found, make a new appointment, discuss with the people how we should go on and when we should meet again to complete the discussion or to have a second part of the discussion. Sometimes it's also good if you have 2 or 3 or 4 sessions planned before the first session. After doing this all, you're finished. You say thank you to the participants because the participants have done the work, and say them goodbye and meet them once again or not. And now we are at the point the moderation has been done. The moderation has been successfully done. And so also I can say goodbye to you. Not before giving you some hints for our discussion. So now, as I told you, it's not the best way for training moderation to have a YouTube video, but don't hesitate to discuss things, give comments, write it down in the comments, write us an email, and maybe we can come into a discussion of this video or of the other video, Human Dimensions. And now, thank you for your attention and goodbye.